Welcome to another Property Quorum. Welcome to yet another Property Quorum. As usual, we have the stalwarts of the Property Quorum massive. Hamish McLay of Search Convey, Juliet Baboolal of gunnercooke, of course, Chris Gilsenan of Route Home. And today we have at least one special guest, potentially two, but we definitely got one. Oliver Pattni, thank you very much for taking the time up from Ironbridge Finance. We do like talking to finance folks. Now, today's topic is an interesting one, but I always like the word havoc. And when you wreak havoc, that's even more interesting. We want to know what's wreaking havoc in the property sector. And of course, without further ado, I'm going to shove our head honcho straight under the bus. Hamish, what's wreaking havoc in the property sector?
I think it's very much a matter of geographical region of where that property might be. And it does happen. Things just sort of leap out. I mean, something that hit me the other day there, which was, I don't know if I made mention of, was one of the London councils. And I was dead chuffed because there was a potential new client from Bristol saying that could I sort this search out? And I thought, I wonder why they're coming to me. And so anyway, I approached the wonderful council, and they actually, what it was, this particular client said the challenge was it was taking 35 days to get the searches back. And I thought, well, that's a bit over the top. We don't have that in the councils we generally sort of work with, but the London ones, they're sort of periodical. I don't get that many of these days. But anyway, so I go along to the council and they say, it's 50 working days. And I said, why has it got to 50? Well, it didn't actually say it because you can't say, they won't let you speak to them. You can't get through to them on the phone. You've got to send messages backwards and forwards, and it takes 2 days to answer them.
You carry a pigeon, just
up that they were desperately short of staff. Obviously, like most councils these days, they've got very little money. So desperately short of staff. To compound the issue, they just brought in this all new singing, dancing, wondrous bit of IT to help speed things up for them. And it didn't work. However, they got rid of the staff beforehand. You know, the usual thing, didn't try it out. And that sort of thing can leap up. But I mean, we've added 3 weeks to something which was already pretty bad. And we were up to 7 weeks now. But so it can actually vary. And as with certain councils, there will be significant sort of things there.
So are you blaming the havoc at the door of AI?
Not entirely. I think finance has got a big thing to do with it, but there's a council finance there. But it doesn't help people. We're very, very fortunate that some of these we can actually sort of get back. I mean, normally we don't go outside 2 to 3 weeks. There are just those rare ones. This just happened to be, as I said, this was over the top. And between a conversation that one person had with them, we'd added 3 weeks already to the turnaround time. And of course, because of the time we're taking, we're going to bump into another bank holiday. So that's going to add another sort of few days.
So they employed the software, and then they got rid of the people, and then realised the software didn't work. Is that what we're talking about?
The other way around, like land registry, they get rid of the people first, then they start the software up that doesn't work, and think,
they need to feed the mice in the wheel. I think. Juliet, what's wreaking havoc in the property? I do like havoc. Wreaking havoc in the property industry.
Well, I mean, there's certainly some havoc that's happening and will always happen as we, evolve.
Common garden havoc.
Well, it really depends on what you're looking at. So, if you look at the land registry, yes, there's obviously issues in terms of their timeframes and the lack of staff, etc. The local authority, there's issues in terms of financing. I think when you're dealing with property, you're dealing with two things that will wreak havoc at any point in time, and that's people and that's process. And so, the reality is, I can say, you've got some really bad lawyers out there, and clearly they wreak havoc, and we hear the complaints all the time, etc. And then there's the process. So the process of it all, and you look at the different elements of property, whether it's transacting or financing. And, there are issues. There are always issues to be dealt with. I saw yesterday there's an article which says a new law is coming out with banks. If they see a payment and they think it's a bit dodgy, they now have 4 working days or something like that to hold the payment before they put it through. The current rule is that they've got to sort it out in 24 hours, which means that if I'm waiting for purchase monies, I know it's going to be coming or not. Within 24 hours, I'll know exactly what's happening. Now it's a waiting game. That 4 working days can absolutely kill a deal. It can cause someone to be in breach of contract, etc. So there's a whole host of things, and that will wreak havoc. Lack of legislation, lack of process, or the ability to follow process. And
it does sound like people are moving the goalposts without telling the goalie.
It's being made by people who don't understand the process. That's the whole problem. So the rest of us need to deal with the consequences of it, the fallout, the havoc, the whatever. And these rules are being implemented or set by people who don't quite understand.
Oh, wow. Chris, it's robots, it's people, it's process. What's wreaking havoc in the property industry, Chris?
Increasing regulation is always a challenge. Because it's always half-baked, half thought through, and like Juliet said, it's when it's implemented, it's the consequences of the actions are not really fully thought through, and the impacts that those have. All the increased regulations over the last 10 years around finance have definitely been challenging and definitely do slow the process down. There are definitely certain lenders out there that they drag their heels anyway, and then compounded now with the additional hoops that they have to jump through. It makes
4
it
days.
very challenging.
They could just, we're going to hold it for another 4 days because we think there might be something nefarious.
That will cause all sorts of chaos. Yeah, that's really challenging. But then one of the issues we've been having recently is, and again, it's one that Hamish was talking about, and I take every day as a learning day. A local authority up north that's merged from 3 different distinct borough councils into one, and it's absolute chaos. Yeah. So we've got searches outstanding with them, local authority searches, and they've just turned around to us and said, "Oh yeah, in another 8 weeks." It's like, what?
8 weeks?
And then the learning curve for me was actually I couldn't find any legislation that puts a time frame on how quickly the local authorities are meant to respond, which blew my mind. It's like another learning day. So I'm kind of disproving my own argument by saying increasing regulation is more of a challenge.
Yeah, but the thing is, right, there's regulation and regulation. People seem to just add random elements in, like an extra 4 days, because they feel like it might be useful. It just can suddenly, you compound that all together and the whole process grinds to a screeching halt.
Yeah, I disagree with that one on the banks. The banks will stop any payment that they don't like very quickly, so they don't need an extra 4 days. That's just ludicrous.
No, it just reminds me like of going backwards towards checks again. Oliver, welcome.
No, thank you for having me.
So what we've got robots, we've got process, we've got humans, we've got lack of regulation and too much regulation. What's causing havoc in the property industry, Oliver?
I think it flows nicely off the regulation point that it's regulation never gets taken away, it only gets added to. It just gets longer and longer and longer. And actually the original rules or regulation that got put in place.
Well, you've got to regulate those regulators.
Was there. So you just continue to get added to. And we see that predominantly in the planning system. So I was actually speaking with a developer yesterday where they bought a site that had planning implemented from the 80s, and they went, so they didn't have to apply for new consent. And they went to the planning portal, and there were 4 documents for the planning approval, just 4. You go nowadays and you look at a new consent, there's sometimes can literally be hundreds of documents, drawings and reports on reports and people's comments on reports. And it seems like it's a never ending process, which is actually...
So you want to go back to the good old days?
Yeah, I don't. That on the flip side, you see what they were building in the 80s, and you think maybe actually it's a good thing. It's a good thing that there's a few more regulations.
Yes, it's the days when they used to make concrete by mixing in their porridge. Yes, it seems that sometimes a bit of regulation helps, but are you saying that all we've got is never-ending additional regulators?
Exactly, and it's never getting taken away, and that is, I think that things need to be replaced as opposed to just being added to, and there needs to be a good reason for that, because otherwise they just, the whole process just gets longer and longer and becomes a minefield for, new entrants. It makes, people that want to become developers in the property sphere, and we mainly focus on development. There's such a high barrier to entry because you have to be able to navigate so many different organizations and processes. It's almost impossible, really.
Always worries me about finance, fellas, because it seems that if you're looking back at a certain trust-filled time, as soon as there was a slight change at one end, all the finance people remove all their financial instruments, and then we're left high and dry. So you guys are sitting around waiting what's going to happen next on the next move of this illustrious government.
No, exactly, and we're glad to see. We sort of sit in a sort of outside of the traditional banking sector. We sort of work for a sort of private fund, and that's where that's why a lot of us have appeared. Especially since the financial crisis, that getting money out of banks has become more and more difficult, and that leaves opportunities for sort of alternative lenders to come into the market. Wow,
Hamish, it all seems like it's approaching madness. Is this new development that's going to happen that some people refer to as a change of government and other people refer to as a breath of fresh air actually going to improve any of this?
Well, sadly, I don't see that's going to happen. I think what we're going to what will continue, and I think it's quite interesting, and heard of that before from Ollie, that it was the consequence of the bank's slowness which encouraged others to come into the bank. And what we've seen before is wherever there's a gap, wherever there's something going wrong, somebody sees an opportunity. And this is where the stupidity comes in, because they just add another layer to it. And instead of helping it, because the trouble is it's never seamless. There's always some blooming great seam there which is going to make it take longer. I mean, the interesting aspect is, and unfortunately, because of the way local authority searches have gone, things have twisted around slightly. There is a legal requirement, and what the consequence is, and this is why people like me started doing this work we did with local authorities, because there was a ruling that, in fact, there was an advisory which suggests that we should be able to access information in the public domain within 24 to 48 hours. Now, that seems perfectly reasonable because it's meant to be in the public domain. However, there was also this if it wasn't readily available, it was at a maximum of 20 working days. Because what we actually did, we originally had to view the information at the council offices. Now that's changed because you'd have thought, well, wow, that's going to speed it up. You don't have to go to the council offices now. Well, yeah, but the trouble is it doesn't take you 3 weeks to drive to a council office. It will take that length of time. And what we've actually sort of seen now, we've had a couple of examples. Juliet sort of mentioned it there. I think it was Juliet. No, it was Chris. That we have extended, and the unitary authority. It's not the first time, particularly sort of up north, but we have the same problem down here. When they combine together, they just make. But we should be able to access the material because we're not actually ourselves viewing it now. We've found a lot more councils managing to override that. We should not have to wait any more than 20 working days. And I'm working at this particular moment with several councils to try and sort of do a bit of beating up. But it takes months and months and months to get it sorted. So there's never a sort of quick fix. And unfortunately, that land registry should be able, had they gone about it properly and had they got their technology right and implemented it effectively, one part of the local authority search or the land charges aspect of it, which isn't important, we could have at least got that quickly. We can't do that quickly now because of all the sort of challenges they've created. So that it's, as I said, there's not an easy fix. But from my perspective, it's simple for me, or it should be simple for me. But as Chris sort of said there, when these councils meld together, the people that you used to speak to are no longer there, and you get different people, some of them lacking experience. Big slowdown there.
Julia, is it all the council's fault then?
Well, I mean, if you look at what Hamish is saying, there is a knock-on effect. So here you have someone purchasing a property, they need searches, they need to fulfill their lender's requirements, they're not getting those searches, a mortgage offer might expire, and then what, you've lost, you can't purchase that property. You've got Ollie, who does the development side of things. He's going to want to know planning's in place, he's going to want a Section 106, etc. in place. Where's the delay at? It's at the local authority, because they take like 4 weeks, maybe even months to get a Section 106 signed. Where's the signatory? In the day of DocuSign and electronic signatures, etc., you're telling me you can't get someone to get their act together or have more than one signatory. I mean, there's certainly
be immediate, shouldn't it?
Well, it's absolutely ridiculous. So, I mean, they have a huge chunk to play. And I think people need certainty, they need consistency, and they need accuracy. And that's where the processes or the actual property market lacks. And these things need to be dealt with. And we need some level of uniformity. You can't have one local authority saying, yeah, I'll get you the local searches in 5 days or whatever it is, and then someone else says, yeah, it's going to take a few months. I mean, you're playing with people's lives, you're playing with the sort of reeling or churning of the economy, so to speak. And for what we pay in council taxes and what we pay in terms of planning applications, etc., more needs to be done. So yeah, they do play a huge part in the havoc that we are currently seeing in the property sector.
Chris, is it the trickle-down effect where the shit just trickles down?
Yeah, that's right. What are you going to do? As an investor, I still need to buy houses, so I've just got to deal with it.
I remember talking to you a few months ago. It seems like a good few months ago. We said, "Oh no, this is great for us at the moment. We're just hoovering them all up." Have things changed radically since that time?
So I'm ambivalent about it. So on the one hand, it's great because I know that it puts people's noses out of joint and they just don't want to do it. They'd be like, nah, I can go make money in the market somewhere else. I'll go do something else with my capital, which is great because it reduces competition. The flip side of that coin is that I need to make sure I'm on top of all the regulations and aware of all the delays that are likely to happen in the process. So if we're looking to use private lending versus institutional lending, what's the impact on the delays of that? Each has different sets of criteria and timeframes associated with it, and different regulatory requirements that we have to fulfill and abide by. Things like the searches that some councils are going to be a bit of a loose end. It's like, well, who do I know who I should be instructing to get the searches done? Obviously, it's Hamish. So there's all sorts of factors in there that will drive some people out of the market, which benefits me, but there's also an on-cost for me to deal with. Increase in regulation, it is that double-edged sword. It is a pain in the arse, but...
So you've had to become a lot more learned just to keep pace.
Yeah,
and at the same time... But as you said, there's been a great exodus from the marketplace of landlords.
Certainly, that's absolutely right. It's the best way to describe it is a barrier to entry, and that barrier is very high. So when I first got in, I put a huge amount of capital into my brain and effectively trained myself, and got trained by very, very experienced people about how to do it. But yes, try and jump into would you try and jump into a new career from a standing start without any training? No,
it's too scary. Run away, Oliver.
Yeah,
I thought that you finance guys, you run on a mixture of courage and sitting there and not getting spooked.
Yes,
there's plenty to spook you right now.
Yes, no, exactly. The world is in a place where your own shadow speaks to you these days in the property world. So yes, there's a lot of reasons to sit on your hands and not do anything. But then ultimately, the economy grinds to a halt. If I'm sitting on my hands, I'm not doing anything. So yeah, you can always find a reason not to do a deal. But which is probably where some of the banks are, and that's why we have these alternative funders that are looking for an angle to do it, and coming up with options and trying to find a solution. And I think
so. Is creative funding where it's at then?
Is that? I think so. I think a lot of the sort of traditional lenders in the space, sort of high street banks, have all pretty much, retracted from the property development sphere, especially, and we sort of see it regularly where we ask for sort of, say, asset and liability statements of developers. You look through their buy-to-lets, and it's a load of lenders you've never heard of. So even in, sort of moving down the sort of change to more traditional buy-to-lets and mortgages, it's still a load of, new entrants to the market, and they're all subsections of, whether it's, Virgin Money are now doing, buy-to-lets, or you can get, these are, you look at people you've never heard of them, and you look them up and they go, oh yeah, no, they've got, a couple of £1 billion on their books of mortgages. Wow.
All right. Well, look, I think this is the time for me to throw this straight over to our chairman of IPSA, I should mention, and just give him the last word. Hamish, take us home.
Well, I think we have to manoeuvre, and it's really basically working with the moving parts that we have and try and just pull them as close together as we can as we go through. And I think Juliet has probably spoke about this initially, and it continues to actually come up within the conversation, that you just have to keep your eye very closely on what is happening and keep engaged with what's going on. It's interesting that both Ollie and Chris mentioned this sort of fact, keeping up to date with regulation as well. This is why you do need that. You do need that legal backup to help you through whatever you're actually sort of doing, because it is impossible, and it does just sort of keep changing. I don't think we're going to see any difference. Nobody's actually going to come into government who has experience of anything to do with any of this, because if you like, when you actually sort of think it's 15 years best part of since we last had the Labour government in, and who actually sort of has the experience. So sadly, nothing is going to happen speedily with them. And it seems also the Bank of England are holding back relative to that, even though we actually sort of see, if you like, the impact sort of financially, we are doing particularly well. I think it's accidental that the government managed to get that happening, rather than that whole thing. However, but it does, and I think this is the great thing, because we've all spoken about this, that both Chris and Ollie particularly, you've got to keep there. You've got to keep looking at it. And unfortunately, Juliet's got to pick up the pieces afterwards, because she's got to get it through there to ensure that there isn't going to be any sort of risk attached to the whole thing. So it's down to a collective. You've got to collaborate to get the whole thing to work.
And as we've said many times, collaborate with people who are localized, in the know, and have experience, and try not to go by fly by night or factory type scenarios. Okay, well, all that remains for me to say is to thank you to each one of our esteemed colleagues. Chris Gilsenan, thank you so much. Juliet Baboolal, Hamish McLay, and of course today's visitor, Oliver Pattni. Remember, shameless plug, every Thursday at 10 o'clock or thereabouts, we will be hammering away, trying to disseminate the chaff from the chit, and hopefully can make some sense of it. Remember, we don't provide advice, but we do provide commentary. And if you do enjoy it, please do come again. Remembering also on Fridays, we've got Property Matters with Hamish McLay, and also what's driving Chris mad that week. We will certainly be going through stuff from the property developer's standpoint. But until then, I thank you all for attending, and please have a marvelous weekend and look after that mental health. Bye-bye now.